Hi, my name is Jenna McCredie, and the title of my applied project that I will be telling you about today is Dressing for the Weather, an Alternating Treatments Evaluation of Visual Supports in a Preschool-Age Neurotypical Child. And so for this project, I decided to use the child that I nanny, which was a very interesting experience doing it with someone that is not a client. And I think I learned a lot from that, which I will tell you about going forward. So my research question for this project was, will the use of a visual support aid in teaching a 4-year-old neurotypical child to match an appropriate item of clothing to a presented numerical temperature value? So what that looked like was I had picture cards with numerical temperature values on them, like 50 degrees, just written very clearly. In one of my conditions, that was condition A, and then condition B would have 50 degrees written very clearly with also a little corresponding visual of the weather. So like the sun or the clouds or rain. Um, And the design of my study was an alternate treatment design with the two conditions, like I just explained, which I labeled A and B. And my participant for the setting was my nanny kid, pseudonym Oscar. And we ran most of these trials at the table in his home in a quiet space. Occasionally, I would do it in the natural environment in the morning, but for my data taking purposes, I stuck to doing it at the table with 10 trials. And then I would evaluate the percent correct at the end. And my rationale for doing this was to increase Oscar's independence with his daily living skills and also provide him with more autonomy in dressing himself for his day. And I kind of wanted to build it up off of a foundation that he already has because he's already very skilled at getting dressed in the morning, but he doesn't necessarily know how to choose the appropriate items of clothing. Like the first time he got dressed by himself, it was in the middle of winter and he put shorts on and a t-shirt. And we were like, that's awesome that you did it, but it's not super applicable for going outside right now. So I thought this would be a good intervention to build on the social validity for him. And then in my previous research, I came across a lot of studies on the use of visuals and learned that the arrangement of the symbols or the visuals can have a significant effect in the way that people search for them. And then I found another study that was teaching words to children, and they took just the word and then, or a card with just the word, and then the card with the word and a picture of the word on the background. And they found that the one with the picture yielded a higher percentage correct for the learning and led to more significant improvements for the participants as compared to those who just received the word. And then finally, I reviewed another study which said that neurotypical children tend to pay more attention to visuals with social validity, which I thought pertained very much to Oscar dressing himself because I know this is something that he is interested in doing, along with the reinforcers that I was doing during the trials, which were established. His mom has also started giving him like $1 in the morning for getting dressed and making his bed. So I thought this would also help him with that, work that in. And then, so my method for doing this was using an alternating treatment design with my two conditions, condition A, which was only the numerical temperature value, as I've stated, and condition B, which had the numerical temperature value and a visual on it. And so my independent variable in this study was the visual support of the weather, like the sun, the clouds, the rain, etc. And then my dependent variable was the percentage of correct matches. So I would mark whether he got it correct or incorrect on my data sheet. I would write what he matched so I could look at kind of where the errors were being made, and then I would go and calculate the percentage correct at the end for my graph. And as I mentioned, it was 10 trials per session conducted for both conditions. And then the results of my study are displayed on my graph. And as you can see, one of the conditions, condition B with the visual, was significantly higher than condition A without the visual. I also ran a baseline, which is not very typical in alternating treatment designs, but I did want to kind of get a sense for where Oscar was at since he is a very smart child and he also has some of these like preconceived notions of getting dressed and in the natural environment and such. But in baseline, I alternated the conditions for that, and he only got 10% correct in condition B and 0% in condition A, which made me feel like it was still an appropriate and applicable thing to teach to him. And then my intervention, you can see an upward trend in both conditions. And I calculated an average of 66% correct in condition A and 88% correct in condition B. So that's about a 20% difference, which I feel is pretty significant. And then the results showed that Oscar performed consistently higher in condition B. And condition A yielded lower scores with a wider range. Like there was one day where he dropped down to 50% correct, which I was kind of surprised about. But I also took into account that that had been after a weekend and we hadn't been running the trials over the weekend because I was doing them during the week typically. And then for my best treatment phase, I evaluated my data and I selected condition B. And in the best treatment phase, Oscar actually met mastery criteria, which was 90% correct across 3 consecutive sessions. So I was very proud of him for that. Um, and then my results indicated that the use of a visual support helped Oscar perform better at matching his appropriate clothing to the weather and temperature, suggesting that visual supports can help enhance his comprehension of abstract concepts, which I think can be applied to many different life skills. And I think being able to think about things in an abstract way like that is going to be very helpful for him going forward in school and in other areas of life. Um, and I think this study highlighted the value of visual support even for neurotypical children. And I was also very curious to look into it because I feel like in the field I've come across different supervisors and different feelings that they have about visuals. And I tend to find that the visual is more helpful for my child, but I've also had supervisors say it was distracting. And again, every kid is different and going to need individualized treatment plans, but I was curious to explore it for that reason. And I think this study highlighted the value of a visual support for the neurotypical children and how it can be built in and applied to daily living. And it made me realize how many more things I could put around the house for him that we could do naturally that might be beneficial for his learning. And then for my limitations, it was a single subject design. Oscar was my only participant. I was the only one running it. I did provide the option to his parents and another caregiver to run it, but I don't think anyone was super interested in doing it with him. So I was primarily the one doing it. And then the length of the intervention I felt was also another limitation. It could have been longer. I know we had a very short period of time to do this. However, I do feel that since he met mastery criteria, it kind of was a pretty fair length for him. I would be curious to see if that's maintained. I might take data for fun to see how that goes in the future. And then my last limitation was he already has an existing like familiarity with clothing and the weather visuals. So he had that prior knowledge to build off of, which is kind of what I wanted. That's why I thought it was more valid for him. And then I have my references listed underneath. But yes, I really enjoyed this. I had a very fun time doing it with him. It was different because I feel like occasionally I have less instructional control because he's my nanny kid and not my client. I feel like I would have more of an more instructional control and more boundaries with a client. I have had that, but since I'm his nanny and kind of involved in a lot of different aspects of his life, that was interesting. But I think it went really well, and I used a token board sometimes while doing it if he needed extra motivation, and he really loved it, and he asked to use that like in his life for other things, which I thought was really cool. So I was very happy with it, and thank you all for listening.